if an innocent person can be convicted, then none of us are safe, and then why should any of us behave well? All right, welcome to Critical Culture. I am Travis.
And I'm Josh.
All right, Josh, what is news today?
News. Travis, I think we should talk about space. Let's talk about NASA.
We should. I know we want to get to due process. It's a hot topic now, but let's go with space first. So,
Yeah.
first article we talked about was the successor to the James Webb Space Telescope.
Right.
So,
that's the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope.
yes, the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, and the James Webb is actually a successor to the Hubble. And like the images from the Hubble, just the images without the scientific understanding we have of the universe have been so inspirational for me in my love of space.
And speaking of Hubble, Hubble just celebrated its 35 years in orbit this year.
Yeah, and
these telescopes are critical to helping us understand what's out there. I mean, if you look back, just take a look at Hubble. Hubble alone, 35 years. That has, like you had said, I mean, the images that came out of Hubble have been so crucial to our education through the school systems and just astronomers' understanding of space as a whole.
It's good for humanity. It's good for the United States to be able to be on that leading edge from a scientific perspective in space, which is where humanity is going. It's inevitable. And I think the other thing to think about here is these space telescopes and anything related to space, these are long-term projects. It's not like getting the band back together for a reunion tour where you brush off the instruments and you hit the road and you're playing music 2 weeks later. I mean, these things are designed and developed and built and launched over a period of decades sometimes.
Well, and just to we're talking about the successor to James Webb, but if we go back to Hubble, because I think Hubble is probably one of the founding telescopes of this current age of discoveries. I mean, Hubble discovered or proved that black holes are the core of almost all galaxies. They also confirmed that supermassive black holes exist. Without Hubble, we would have never known that. And when we compare Hubble's imagery to James Webb's, I mean, it's like going from the first iPhone to the iPhone, the latest and greatest iPhone. What are we on, 16 now? The quality is just so much better and there's so much more information. And now we look at that jump from James Webb to the Nancy Grace. I mean, I can't even imagine what we're going to find. And to talk about cutting that, we're just well, that doesn't mean that space exploration stops. It just means that we, as the United States, will not be leading it.
Right.
We'll be behind.
It also means that we are wasting all of the money we've spent up to this point. And in the article I read, so this thing is pretty much built. They were starting to move it to some place so they could get it ready for launch. It's like, now you're going to cancel this and think you're saving whatever amount of money, and you just completely devalued all of the investment you have already in getting this done. So like, it's just not smart. It's not saving money at all. It's wasting money.
Just a quote from a undisclosed government official. It says it sets a program that is clearly, it sets back a program that is clearly leading program in the world in a historic fashion. You take that program and shoot it through the head. I mean, that's probably the best way to describe what's happening with it.
Yeah. I think they talked about this budget that was proposed as an extinction level event for research at the space agency, and
I hate this so much, Travis.
I do, but we'll see. It's a proposed budget. Congress hasn't put it through yet. I know in some cases this would impact jobs in their areas. And with the very slim majority that Republicans have, hopefully they can salvage the NASA budget for the right things. And this is one of the right things that NASA should be doing, because it's not something that private companies are not building space telescopes to look out into the universe and find our way out there. Private companies are doing telescope or satellites that deal with what's going on Earth because that
Yeah, they
makes
look
money. So
back.
this is exactly the kind of thing that NASA needs to be involved in.
Absolutely. Well,
So there's another.
speaking of, yeah,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Speaking of NASA and funding, um, we've got our new NASA administrator, incoming NASA administrator, uh, Jared Isaacman. Sounds like he's clashing a little bit with his good buddy. Okay, that's maybe not accurate, but with Elon Musk, with his Mars program, and his comment is generally stating that NASA should focus on the Artemis program as well as SpaceX, and not primarily focus on SpaceX's lofty goals. I have to say I do agree with him. I think we can get more out of. I mean, yeah, eventually let's go to Mars, but I think we need to prioritize the moon before Mars. Anyway,
Yes.
what else do you got to say about that?
Yes. So yeah, good point. Again, it's going to come down to budget and what they can and can't do. And again, you think about like the Artemis program, there's so many moving pieces to it, and so much of
Right.
it was already outsourced to other companies. So if anything maybe didn't get the future investment, it'd be something like the space launch system, which again
Mhm.
was bigger than the other heavy lift rockets that are in development and testing and launching now. But it was also very expensive. And that's an area where you look, hey, commercial space sector can take care of that launch capability of heavy payloads. There's still a role for the U.S. government in funding a lot of these other rovers and the Gateway and all these other pieces,
Mhm.
parts that were part of the Artemis program as a whole that they should still be involved in, still be practicing these techniques and developing these technologies and learning through experience the types of things that we're going to need when we also get to Mars, because we're going to need similar, like, hey, there's going to be a rocket that gets things up into space, and that may not be the rocket that gets things from Earth to Mars.
Mhm.
And whatever gets us from Earth to Mars isn't necessarily going to be the rocket that gets you from Mars orbit onto the surface of Mars. So I think it's a
Yeah.
good thing. Hopefully he can salvage the good parts of it and keep the overall program running to also feed into the commercial sector that's developing these capabilities that they're going to plug and play into the overall mission that are definitely commercializable, I guess you'd say, over the next few decades, that should be in commercial hands and not government
Yeah.
hands. Similar
Yeah.
to, I know, Pete Buttigieg was on a podcast recently and had a couple of great segments where he was talking about, yeah, you know, the iPhone that's going to be developed by a private company like Apple, and there's no way that the government's going to do that. But that depends on the internet and depends on this, that, and the other thing that private companies were not going to do, that the government had to fund research for and develop and lay the groundwork for, to have all this economic activity that rests on top of it. So space isn't just a commercial thing.
Mhm.
There's a role for both private and public funding
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
making it happen. So super.
Yeah.
So that's our space update. Now, without further ado, shall we get into due process, Josh?
Due process. That's I feel like I've heard that a few times recently, Travis. Is something
I
going on?
have. I have. Well, there's a couple cases. The current administration is prioritizing deporting illegal immigrants, and especially ones that are criminals. But there are many cases where they're getting it wrong. People aren't getting their due process. They're not getting their day in court. There could be sketchy evidence at best for some of
At
these
best.
people, like
Mhm.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Garcia. Yep.
Apparently, the main piece of evidence they had against him was that I believe it was a police officer, wrote a report once that he believes he was gang related because he had on a Bulls hat.
Right.
And because some anonymous, unidentified informant said he was a big part of M13. And then this prosecutor, policeman, whoever it was found guilty of many things that are unbecoming of an officer of the law. So basically, his whole character and the way he did his job was suspect. But that was the evidence against him. that they said was why they did this, without having a day in court for a judge and or a jury to say, is this evidence enough to sentence a man to go live in a foreign terrorist prison where he may never come home again.
And well, that's the other part of this too, is that just sets grounds for deportation. You know, we send them back to the country, right? We're sending them to a gulag.
Yes.
You know, and,
Yes.
and that's not even outside the scope of this discussion of due process. But yeah, it's a slippery slope, Travis. That's all I can really say about it. It's frightening that this can even happen at this time.
Well, and I think it's important to also remember, I think Auschwitz is a term that most people are familiar with, and they get sick of the hearkening back to Nazis and fascism in the middle of the 20th century. But Auschwitz wasn't in Germany; it was in Poland.
Right.
So they were doing the same thing there. Like, the difference between a concentration camp and prison is you can just send someone to a concentration camp just because of who they are. They didn't have to do anything wrong. They are Jewish, therefore they are guilty of being Jewish.
Yeah, and I mean, there's good reason why these parallels are being made, is because there's stark similarities between what happened in Nazi Germany and what's sort of forming here in the United States, and how the decisions are being made and how certain groups of people are being targeted. And again, you know, I kind of want to take a step back and say, you know, we're not advocating necessarily for Kilmar himself. Like, if he's guilty, he's guilty. That's not what we're trying to say. If he's an MS-13 member, well, he is, and then he would deserve to be deported. But let's find out. You know, let's go through the process, have the prosecution show evidence that he is, in fact, what the government is saying he is, as opposed to just taking the government's word for it and getting him out of here.
Right. And there's reports of like 2-3-year-old children that are being deported. And again, maybe we don't have all of the evidence to say what was going on there was right or wrong. Like, but the one I heard, like, the mother was maybe an immigrant, but who knows how legal or illegal, but the father was American, and the child was born in America. And this 2-3-year-old child was deported. Obviously didn't go to El Salvador to CCOT, but deported and taken away. An American citizen that was 2 years old was taken away from his American father without a day in court to figure out what should be done with this child.
I mean, the point is cruelty. The point is to stoke fear.
Yes.
That's what's behind this, you know?
Yep. They want to make a show of it to some extent. It's not just to get rid of them, but to make a show of it so people may be less inclined to move here, or people may self-deport, which they keep talking about.
Right. And then you've got a government who, you know, just got cleaned out by Doge workforce. They're sending emails, potentially erroneously, maybe not, to American citizens saying they need to self-deport in 10 days. You know, the whole apparatus around this is just chock full of incompetence, you know?
Yeah.
And then this rushing to get immigrants out. I mean, we can have a discussion about immigration. We can have a discussion about people being here illegally, but the answer is not this massive hammer attack to the whole system and just start exporting or deporting people that aren't getting a fair chance in court.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And some of these have a legal. They went through a process. They're here legally, and that's just getting yanked away on a whim's notice.
And going after people in what before was always considered private or safe places, right? Like going to houses of worship.
Right.
In some cases saying, if you don't have a warrant, maybe that's okay. And the Department of Justice is telling you it's okay. But it's like, wait a minute, the Department of Justice can't say that's okay. That's against the law. That you can't just give yourself power to break the law. Why are you doing this? We're enforcing the law. So you're going to break the law to enforce the law. Do you realize how stupid that sounds?
Right.
And you think it's okay because you call it an emergency, but it's really not that big of an emergency that we have to throw away our rights and our rule of law just to kick some people out of the United States that are statistically less likely to commit crime.
Right. There's a reason why this is enshrined in our Constitution, because this has happened before. This type of a tyranny has happened before
Yep.
in human history. And the founding fathers presumably wanted to write into our Constitution ways to prevent that from happening for
Yeah.
future generations.
So what is written into our Constitution to prevent this from happening, Josh? Is this one of the
What?
amendments or something?
Yeah, this is part of the Fifth Amendment. Sorry, Travis, I'm pulling up the wrong tab here. Where did I put that tab?
It's all right. And I know the Trump administration knows about the Fifth Amendment. I know, who is it? Michael Flynn. Wasn't he the guy that worked for him in the first term that was working through Turkey and had like incriminating stuff from Russia, and he pleaded the Fifth, like he didn't want to talk about it, so he pleaded the Fifth and basically got off. So they know the Fifth Amendment exists.
They know what it's about. Yep.
They know what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually part of the 5th and the 14th, and I'm saying the 14th because I see that on Wikipedia. So, but basically, yeah, it's defined as a safeguard from arbitrary denial of life, liberty, and property outside of the sanction by the government, outside the sanction of law. So, in many more words, it says that every person here needs to go through due process before any laws can be applied against them. Basically, they have to be proven to have broken the law.
Right. Due process means the government must follow the law and not violate any parts of it.
Right.
And I found that quote about the 14th Amendment, and that basically says this applies to states too, because the Fifth Amendment applied to the federal government.
Sure. And of course, the concept of due process isn't something that our founding fathers just made up either. You know, due process goes a long way back.
Yes. It applies to all persons, number one, in our amendment, but going all the way back, usually when we see it in the Constitution or Declaration of Independence, we summon our founding fathers. Mm-hmm. We have a seance and ask them exactly what did you mean or where did you get this from?
And
my seance led me to the founders.archives.gov that has a bunch of letters and writings from various founding fathers that are relevant to what's going on here. And this first one is a quote from Benjamin Franklin. It was in a letter he wrote to Benjamin Vaughan on March 14th, 1785. And the general topic of the letter was some alternative takes on punishment outlined in two pamphlets that they had exchanged. One from an Englishman was essentially for hanging all thieves. And the other one from a Frenchman was basically advocating for the punishment fitting the crime. And the quote that we probably all heard before, that it is better 100 guilty persons should escape than that one innocent person should suffer, is a maxim that has long and generally approved, never that I know of controverted. So that's Benjamin Franklin's words. Let's see what else.
Another quote that stuck out to me in that letter was to put a man to death for an offense which does not deserve death, is it not murder? And I thought, that's along those same lines. I mean, that's a good way to summarize it.
Right. And so that's, you see here that Benjamin Franklin is basically taking the side of the Frenchman, who is advocating for the punishment fitting the crime, which is another maxim that we've all heard of before. Let the punishment fit the crime. So absolutely, if they haven't murdered, to murder them is a crime. A lot of people believe capital punishment itself is something we should never do, even in cases of murder. And I'm frankly for that. I think it doesn't serve any sort of prevention. There's no extra justice that comes from it. How do you know you got things right? So many people were sentenced to death that weren't actually guilty. And who are we to take a life? In most cases, I just believe that doesn't fit. And there's kind of an argument there that basically says if we are the kind of society that goes out and kills people to commit justice, then we are setting an example that killing is something we do or we are okay with as a society, because our government itself is killing people, just to kill people. And it was in one of these letters they were talking about how they're comparing all these countries at the time, and how in England their rate of like property crime was higher than anywhere else by far. And the writer of that letter was saying, well, does not the British Empire itself go a privateer and thieve from colonies around the world? So if our government is doing it, we're setting this example that it's okay to do it. Which could extend here too. If it's okay for our government to not go through due process and just mete out justice as it sees fit, would it not be okay for our people to do the same thing?
Right. It opens the door to vigilantism.
Yes. If it's okay for the government to be vigilantes, well, we're part of the government too.
Yeah. Even the concept of due process goes way back. Even before that letter itself was defined in the Magna Carta.
Yes.
Back in 1378, I think it was. Clause 39 of the Magna Carta: no free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land. 1354, that's the year. So this concept is nothing new.
No.
It's been here for a while.
Right. Well, the Romans had something similar too, right? That whole principle of innocent until proven guilty, or presumption of innocence. In Roman law, particularly the 12 Tables and Codex, established the principle that the prosecution must prove the defendant's guilt. Right. The burden of proof is on the one who declares, not the one who denies. So the concept of presumption of innocence evolved through the centuries, and it is still here in modern legal systems, including our American justice system. So obviously it was an English law. That's part of how it came to the United States. That quote from Benjamin Franklin is attributed to William Blackstone, Sir William Blackstone, who is an English jurist, justice, and Tory politician, most noted for his commentaries on the laws of England, which became the best known description of the doctrines of English common law. So these commentaries on the law of England is divided into 4 volumes. You've got the rights of persons, things, private wrongs, and of public wrongs. And it is the leading work on the development of English law, and played a huge role in development of the American legal system. It's often quoted as the definitive pre-revolutionary source of common law by the United States courts. Opinions of the Supreme Court quote from his work whenever they wish to engage in historical discussion that goes back that far. So he's no lightweight. William Blackstone is well known in legal circles. And his direct quote was, "All presumptive evidence of felony should be admitted cautiously, for the law holds that it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than 1 innocent suffer." So Benjamin Franklin just upped the ante there from 10 to 100 guilty people.
Yeah.
He's putting more emphasis on this concept of protecting the innocent being more important than punishing the guilty.
Sure. Right. Well, this is all to say that what's currently happening with a lot of these deportations is that due process is not happening. And we have, as a species, as Americans, have a long history of supporting due process. So this is something we need to fight for. This is something that we can't just ignore and let go. So because once we do, there's nothing to. If the government doesn't have to follow the law, then
if
we got nothing.
If you can be judge, jury, and executioner, if you can assume they're guilty just because you think they're guilty, and they have to prove it, but there's no way for them to do it. I did found evidence of one movement throughout the centuries that did that, and that was the Spanish Inquisition.
Mm-hmm.
The Spanish Inquisition, especially if you were guilty of committing heresy, you were guilty until proving yourself innocent, and there basically was no way to do it. And the Spanish Inquisition is like an example of some of the worst cases of what people have done with religion and power in the millennium of recorded history. So that's your alternative right there.
Right.
So there's another quote I want to read here, and this is from John Adams, another founding father. He was a defense lawyer in this case. Another article or letter that's available on the Founders Archives. It goes a little something like this. We are to look upon it as more beneficial that many guilty persons should escape unpunished than one innocent person should suffer. The reason is because it's of more importance to community that innocence should be protected than it is that guilt should be punished. For guilt and crimes are so frequent in the world that all of them cannot be punished. And many times they happen in such a manner that it is not much consequence to the public whether they are punished or not. But when innocence itself is brought to the bar and condemned, especially to die, the subject will exclaim, "It is immaterial to me whether I behave well or ill, for virtue itself is no security." So this is the long form version of he who would sacrifice his liberty for security deserves neither. Which is the short way to say that, but I like the whole quote there because I thought that was pretty good, because we can say all we want about, it's better for 100 guilty people to go free than one innocent person to be convicted. And that's the it right there, because if an innocent person can be convicted, then none of us are safe, and then why should any of us behave well?
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's some heavy stuff, Travis.
Yeah. These are not new concepts.
Right.
As we're finding, and you could go back to the Bible, and there's a lot about justice and innocent and protecting the innocent versus punishing guilt. I mean, this desire for justice is inherent in human beings. We want things to be fair. We want things to be right. And that's normal, but you got to be careful how you do it. And you have to protect innocence more than you punish guilt, because the alternative is to say, well, if we punish innocence once in a while, maybe it will prevent future guilt. That doesn't fly in my book. Mm-hmm. I don't want someone innocent being punished to make an example out of somebody that somebody else sees, and well, maybe I won't break the law now. There's just no call for it.
Right. Yeah. And we've said this several times. We're not advocating for anything new right here. This has been literally the law of the land for ages. And it's up to us to make sure it stays the law of the land.
Yep.
Because as soon as we start giving that power back, it's hard to take it back. As soon as we start losing that power, it's hard to take back.
Yes. Yep. So I'm sure it's not the last we'll hear about it.
Right. This is going to go on for a while. I think what's happening currently, we've got, this is completely outside the fact that we've had the Supreme Court rule against the administration, basically saying that in this particular case with Garcia, he needs to be returned home. He was wrongly sent and deported. There's a lot of other ancillary cases that are basically saying the same thing. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a case that's really ruled in favor of the president on this or the administration on this. So, that's mildly good news. Well, we just have to see if the president and his administration adheres to their ruling, which is going to be the next battle, right? That's a whole different topic, but That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
So it's going to be around for a while. That's what we're trying to say.
We live in interesting times.
We do.
For sure. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.